Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Friday, April 9th, 2024 meeting of the Nantucket Historical Commission. Let me begin by getting our board members. I'm just getting used to the screen here. All right, well, I see Abby for starters. Good morning. Clement Derkis.
I'm here.
Sorry, I didn't say present. I am present.
Thank you. Mickey?
I'm here.
And Tom? Tom, I think you're muted, but we see you. Rita?
Yep, here.
Here.
Good morning. Is that all of us for the commissioners? We've got Holly standing by, and we have some guests today. Mike Burns, welcome. And Sam Phelan.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and begin. Is there any are there any comments from the public? Seeing Sam's on the fence, but you're coming up. If there's anything that isn't on the agenda, you could bring that up. Seeing none, I will move on to the staff update. Holly, are you able to help with that?
Yes.
Thanks so much.
Good morning, everybody. Just a couple things here. One is our 2022 surveys that we received from PAL. We received the last batch 5. So obviously it's been about a week that we've had them. If you could review them and send me any comments individually, that would be great. I'll get them over to Ginny and her team as soon as possible. But you'll notice that these are the last of the fish lots, which is excellent. Next topic would be the support letter that you all unanimously voted on for the historic tax credits for 5 Surfside Road. As you remember, that was specifically for this is a resubmittal. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rita. This is just can't remember now. Did you guys already vote on this one, or was this?
We've sent previous letters. They're just, we haven't voted to send another one.
Yes. Okay.
For
So,
this, so, but there's no
you.
changes from the prior application.
Correct. So as you all remember, we have our letter, our application request, and nothing has changed in their proposal. They, I believe, are still waiting in the next line for funding. So we would be looking for you all to endorse their proposal again with no changes, and have Angus literally simply change the date on the letter and send that off to their application to the state. So we could get that going. That'd be great. I guess with a motion.
We can get that going. I just recall that we made the distinction that we approved of the house plans. We did not approve of the landscaping, the pool, and Angus clearly pointed that out in his letter. So I would assume we would just send the exact same letter with the date change. Seems okay to me.
Mr. Chair, through you to comment, yes, that's exactly what we're looking for. There'd be no change in the substance of your letter. It would be simply just rewriting or putting a new date on it, and no changes.
Well, I mean, while we're at it, do we want to just go ahead and does someone want to make that motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Tom. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thanks, Abby. On your motion, Tom?
Aye.
Abby?
Aye.
Rita?
Aye.
Thank you. Clement?
Aye.
And Mickey?
Aye.
Aye as well. We will get that letter off. And
Thank
so
you.
there's still one thing left of the update that I should
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the last thing is about offshore wind. It's a very generic topic on here. Basically, as we know, that there's been a lot of different things going on with the offshore wind, and you all, it looks like I'm swaying. My apologies. I'm in a car. You all know we have Tom as your Section 106 rep, and Diane Coombs represents the HDC, and I represent the Regional Planning Authority, the NPDC, for Section 106 under the National Historic Preservation Act for the consultation purposes of these wind farms. And with that, the offshore work group, which is something that myself and my colleague Lauren Sinatra are both the staff liaisons for. Our expert council to kind of have a meeting with all of us together. There's other members, if you go on the town's website, who represent, basically other aspects of town. And we're going to have a meeting coming up, I believe May 1st. I have to look it back in my calendar, but both Tom and Diane have that. This is a non-public meeting. This is more or less to get everybody up to speed on where a lot of these different projects are. As you all know, the town has a good neighbor agreement with Vineyard Wind, and that means all of Vineyard Wind projects, but they're obviously required to keep the town as well as the public abreast on what's going on with their projects. And that's something that we are wanting to make sure that they're held accountable to. And then there's other developments in the pipeline. So just wanted to bring that up to the commission, and wanted to, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair, to give this opportunity. If Tom still wants to continue to represent you with Section 106, great. Just wanted to make sure that you all maybe re-vote on that if that's okay. So that's my update.
Thanks, Holly. Tom, how are you feeling about your participation? You've been our representative for as long as we've had one.
Right. I don't agree with the offshore wind at all. I didn't, but we were late to the party, so I really didn't have any say in it at the time. But if somebody else wants to take that over, be my guest. In other words, I don't want to be on that board anymore. I don't want to be there. As a matter of fact, I think I got appointed by Hillary. She said, Tom, you're going to be the 106 representative. And that's how I actually got on the board.
Anyone, well, we don't have to decide this right now, but if anyone would like to take Tom's place representing us with the offshore wind, please let me and or Holly know, and we can go from there. If there aren't any questions or comments at this point, let's move on to the improvements on Pleasant Street and Williams Lane. Mike, you want to lead this one?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and there's a couple of items in the meeting material that, if it's all right, I'll share my screen and just get ready to run through that. There's a slide deck of two alternatives for these Pleasant Street and Williams Lane improvements. And there's a letter from Sam Phelan, who's here at the meeting to kind of participate in the discussion. The letter does, and I'll run through the slides here in a second. I'll just note that and maybe summarize the letter, and maybe you can ask Mr. Phelan about the letter, and then tell me to go through the slide presentation whenever you want me to start that. But the letter does correctly note that there were various variables that are in place to help with the decision making of selecting an alternative. We did look at volume of the roads, the circulation patterns, the different modes that are being accommodated, the costs of both alternatives as well as the impacts of both alternatives. And when I say we looked at this, I'm saying we're pretty much going through a committee process. We did share these alternatives with our Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. We have a draft, I have a recommendation to the NPDC from that advisory committee that has not been acted on just yet. The alternatives have also been presented to the Traffic Safety Work Group. They have not provided a recommendation yet, and the NPDC has, as well as the Select Board, have reviewed the presentation. No decision's been made just yet on this. We've just outlined some variables, and Mr. Phelan, and correctly so, pointed out that maybe there's another variable that needs to be considered related to historic integrity, and that's kind of the why we're here discussing this project. And in Mr. Phelan's letter, he does outline, and I'm not sure if the group has looked into this at all, but context-sensitive solutions was a recommendation from Mr. Phelan to kind of help guide the discussion with this topic of this variable of historic integrity. Looking through that, I mean, context-sensitive design, at least in my experience, has always been a consensus building exercise. We've coordinated together with this committee and planning on a letter of support for the Milestone and Pulpus intersection, and that you might recall out of that process of just looking at what's there, and through discussion ultimately have all that effort culminate into a letter of support with some modifications of design. And I think that's what we want to do out of this effort as well, is to ensure that we all have a shared vision and understand what the factors are. What are the factors that relate to historic integrity, and what are the elements that we need to preserve and enhance the neighborhood there along Pleasant Street. This context-sensitive approach, I mean, we do a lot of this already in Nantucket. When the town does have a complete streets policy of accommodating all users, that's part of this context-sensitive approach. So I guess out of this effort, we want to ensure that we all the different committees have a shared vision, and that this all culminates into some recommendations that we have, so that we have a workable design that's actually functional, that turns out to be exceeds everyone's expectations without any waste and is very efficient. So I think out of this, I kind of got this distilled down to 2 essential questions, perhaps, but this is all for discussion. Essentially, with these 2 projects on Williams and Pleasant Street, we need some input on the elements to either what needs to be preserved or replaced, essentially what has to stay, and then what can be added. We need some input on the materials. Mr. Phelan does provide some alternative standards in the letter, and I think that's probably a good basis for this committee's review and providing input on those design alternatives. I will say that he does suggest a soft surface path as maybe some consideration of like the surface material. And we just run into some issues with that for accessibility reasons. Since this is going to be a heavily used path or sidewalk or whatnot, we have to be considerate about the materials, and that soft surface probably isn't the route we would want to go from maintenance and accessibility reasons, and that perhaps there's a hard surface that everyone can agree is appropriate for that corridor. So with that said, Mr. Chair, those, I hope I got this distilled down to the 2 different elements that we kind of wanted, what needs to stay and what can be added. I'm happy to run through the presentation if that's all right, or we can just open this up to the any questions from the commission if they feel that they have a good understanding of the material that's in the slide deck.
Thanks, Mike. I think that the commissioners will probably want to hear the presentation before comments and questions.
Sure.
But Sam, do you want to wait till after, or would you like to comment before Mike begins the presentation?
I'll just make a couple of brief comments. Number 1, pedestrian and bike safety is critical here. And it's wonderful to see that Nantucket is starting to address that issue. It's been a big issue there on Pleasant Street for several years. I don't think that issue is as great on Williams Lane as it is on Pleasant Street, where you've got faster moving cars and you've got a higher volume of pedestrians and bikes. So that's one thing. The other point that I just want to reinforce, Pleasant Street and Williams to a lesser extent really has, that section of Pleasant Street from Five Corners down to Williams Lane really hasn't been that disturbed in the last 120 years. We do have the one subdivision that occurred on the east side of the road down around the intersection of Pleasant and Williams. But the rest of that street and the sides of the street is pretty much intact for a long period of time. And we've got photographs, if the committee wants to see photographs of both Williams as well as Pleasant Street. And I just think it's one of these, it represents the edge of town. And it was always known as the edge of town. It was called Newtown when it was back in the 1800s. And many of those elements of it being the edge of town continue to exist. And I would hate to see a modern intrusion destroy that historic look that's there. That's all I really have to say at this point.
Thanks, Sam. Commissioners, am I assuming correctly that you all want to wait till after Mike is finished with the presentation? Okay.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Mike, please continue.
Sure. And there's a lot of material here. I don't know if I want to read off all the material on the slides, but I'll just do this as efficiently as I can, just so we can get to the discussion part of this. Just so you know, there's essentially two alternatives. Both of them relate to traffic flow. Should the road be Pleasant and Williams, should they be two-way traffic flow as they are now, which does provide, good traffic flow conditions, or preserves the existing traffic flow conditions. Under the two-way scenario, it does have better accommodation of bicycle traffic and a reduced impact to the abutters, meaning we won't need as much easement for the projects, and there's less impact to utilities, need to relocate utility poles, and the two-way preserving the flow did have a higher cost. And under the one-way condition, there is a detriment to the traffic flow options, and there's some slides at the end of the presentation that discuss the traffic flow impacts. But this one-way condition does provide better accommodations for bicyclists and pedestrians, whereas the two-way flow just did not. That was going to be a sidewalk, and under the one-way condition, that was going to be a path for bicyclists and pedestrians to use, which ultimately did provide less impact because we're repurposing a travel lane for that accommodation, and it had consequently a less cost to implement. But again, there is traffic flow impacts for vehicle circulation that I can get into at the end. Just quickly about the alternative one option. This is again the two 10-foot travel lanes with a 5-foot sidewalk that would be along most of the path. The area that Mr. Phelan is, I guess, most concerned about is the area 1. And we have some renderings later on that kind of show what the street level condition of that area 1 is. And then there's another area here 5, which is closer to the Stop and Shop area. And we have recommendations for on-street parking, on-street angled parking under both conditions, two-way or one-way. And we can show you what those configurations are for bicycle and pedestrian accommodations. Under the, again, the two-way alternative, it preserves the existing traffic flow. This particular area does not show right-of-way impacts. There is an area further down the street that does show that the sidewalk is completely on private property, and will require, a little over 1,000 square foot of permanent easement, as well as some temporary construction easement as well to implement. This is the existing condition and the Pleasant Street section close to Five Corners. And there's excuse me, another section by Mr. Phelan's area, and this is what the street level condition looks like with a sidewalk there. There you can see the note there that trees would be impacted and would need to be replaced. It's kind of crude imagery, but you can see the split rail fencing is being provided along with an asphalt path for pedestrian accommodation, but with, like I said, it's really not a lot of bicycle accommodation along the corridor. And then further down on Pleasant Street, here's what the image would look like with the angled parking, and then the area in blue is the right-of-way impact for that area by Stop and Shop to provide the angled parking. And just a little bit of history about the angled parking. This was originally a recommendation from the Mid-Island Partnership about 20 years ago, 25 years ago. That was codified into the Mid-Island Area Plan. So this is essentially an effort to create more of a Main Street environment down at that end of Pleasant Street to, again, better accommodate the parking demands, pedestrian demands, provide a traffic calming elements to the street, and create more of a Main Street environment along this section of Pleasant Street, which again is a little bit different than the area that Mr. Phelan is discussing further up by Five Corners. Alternative 2 is repurposing the southbound Pleasant Street travel lane to accommodate bike and pedestrian flow. There's two images here. One on top shows that there's, the southbound lane will be completely repurposed for bike and pedestrian flow. The image on the bottom shows that there's actually bike lanes on either side for north and southbound bike accommodation with vehicle circulation in the middle section. We're actually not going to recommend that for other reasons, but just was discussing with the Bike and Pedestrian Committee, that's probably not a desirable alternative. So, but that's just there for reference and to show that we were diligent and looked at this. The street level renderings for the area by Five Corners. Here's again, it's a little crude, and we can discuss if other imagery and renderings are going to be needed out of this decision-making process, but this attempts to show what the bike circulation would be next to the vehicle traffic and the separation between the what will be a contraflow bike lane that you see in a lot of urban environments. There's which trying to be demonstrated here is a buffer with using brick or some kind of other hard material as a separator rather than using plastic or concrete, what are called armadillos in some areas, just little bulbs to separate the vehicle traffic from bike and pedestrian circulation, or plastic vertical stanchions in the road. I think we can all agree that's something we try to avoid with this buffer. But this image is trying to show that we have some kind of masonry, either Belgian block or cobblestone or something that's easily maintained and looks within the character of the island. And again, just quickly, this is an image showing the bike lane alternative of how that would be configured. And again, that's not being really pursued unless you think that would be something within the character of the island. But Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, I don't think preferred this. Here's what the section along for alternative 2 of by Mr. Phelan's property. This again shows the an 8-foot wide sidewalk with a 2-foot buffer. Again, better accommodation of bike and pedestrian traffic with this alternative, but there is a southbound, the traffic flow for the southbound will be diverted to other areas. And just quickly, here's what the two-way, one of the two-way, one-way alternatives looks like for alternative 2 on the lower end of Pleasant Street by Stop and Shop. Again, this needs a little bit of design element right now. This is showing that cycle track or between the parallel parking and the vehicle lane. There's I'm not sure if I have it on here. Oh yeah, there's an idea to actually flip that and have the parallel parking next to the travel lane, and then have the cycle track next to the sidewalk. That's usually a safer accommodation of that. But if we're going to pilot this, which is the recommendation from the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, just to see what the traffic flow impacts are, if we're going to pilot this, we wouldn't be able to do this configuration. It would be the other alternative, or the other configuration, just on a temporary basis to evaluate traffic patterns. Just quickly on Williams Lane, the same two alternatives, one-way and two-way. This is the existing condition. Alternative 1 would have a 5-foot sidewalk with Williams Lane is actually very narrow. It's 2 9-foot travel lanes, which I mean it's very tight along in that corridor. But this will be the alternative one condition: 5-foot sidewalk, 18-foot area for two-way traffic flow. The area in blue on this rendering shows the right-of-way impact of providing that. You know, something like 300 square foot of permanent easement that would be needed in this area. Under alternative 2, repurposing I guess it's the south westbound lane to bike and pedestrian traffic. There's no blue area easements shown here, so the right-of-way impact would be much less. This is the street level rendering showing how that would be accommodated. Again, a 10-foot lane for vehicle traffic, 2-foot buffer, and because it's so narrow, the cycle track would actually be less. It'd be more like a 6 to 8, 6 at the narrowest point, but mostly 8 feet instead of the 8 to 10 feet. In some other areas. Just quickly about the cost. This is, you know, I'm not going to read every line here, but just letting you know that the one-way traffic flow accommodation was less expensive and had less right-of-way impact for both alternative for the one-way alternative. This is just a chart showing the level of service impact to other area intersections. If we went to one way along Pleasant Street and Williams Lane, essentially the intersection that would be impacted the most is the Four Corners intersection, the Sparks Avenue, Prospect Street, Surfside Road intersection. There is a recommendation or a concept to provide a roundabout at that intersection to increase to improve operations and increase capacity and reduce delay at that intersection. With that improvement, this actually is kind of a moot issue. It would be, I think traffic flow would not be as impacted as greatly, but if it did go to one way and the intersection stayed under the existing configuration, it would be much more burdened. Right here we're showing that the overall delay of the intersection is 137 seconds. You all might know it's probably not 2 minutes, but more like a 5-minute problem in the summertime to get through that intersection. It would be greatly impacted. It almost doubled the delay with under a one-way condition of the other roadways. So it would just, again, add burden specifically along the Atlantic Avenue approach to the Four Corners intersection. So, you know, the assumption is a lot of the traffic will be diverted either to Atlantic Avenue or to Prospect Street instead of being able to go southbound on Pleasant Street. So this is just a breakdown of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee recommendation. They wanted to pilot a one-way alternative for Pleasant and Williams Lane to see what the ramifications of the traffic flow would be, if it would be acceptable to the community, since it had the best accommodation of bike and pedestrian traffic flow through the area. And that's important because we did surveys last summer as part of our long-range transportation plan update, where respondents to those surveys, and we had great participation in the survey of local year-round and visitors. 60% wanted to invest more in side paths. That was the highest investment priority of all community facilities. 90% of respondents supported accommodating all modes of transportation, the complete streets policy that I mentioned earlier, and that's in these context-sensitive design guidance that Mr. Phelan provided. We had overwhelming support for that. Capacity improvements, the number one capacity improvement that the community suggested was more space for alternative transportation, which is just biking and walking facilities. Rather than adding capacity to intersections. I think roundabout was like the second preferred alternative for improving capacity, but providing accommodation for other modes was number one. But again, the number one concern that we got from respondents is traffic congestion. So this is why this is such an important issue of fleshing out the alternatives for these accommodations, because there would be more impacts to the Four Corners intersection. So that's where we are now with the recommendation for this. The NPDC and the Select Board have not decided this yet. Traffic safety, as I mentioned, hasn't decided this yet. We're introducing this subject to you all now for something beyond the circulation, mode accommodation, and cost and butter impacts. We're talking about historic integrity. I did try to show you some renderings of what that could look like on the street level, we can enhance those and improve upon those if that's something that would be helpful to this process. Or we can just discuss about what are some of the elements along the corridors that kind of contribute to historic integrity. Try to agree on all that, and then perhaps, Mr. Chair, I guess ultimately we want to do what we did with the Milestone and Pulpus project and get a letter of support with conditions. I think the conditions are like, what are the features of the corridors that you would like to preserve, and what are features that could be added to that would help contribute to and preserve and enhance the environment of the neighborhood. So I hope that wasn't too verbose, but I'm
Thanks
happy
so
to
much,
answer any
Mike.
questions.
I appreciate it. Commissioners, do you have any questions? Mickey, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a question for Sam. Sam, you mentioned that there were some that you were concerned about adding sort of modern appearing features, and I'm just curious if you could be more specific about what those concerns were about. You know, is it the one-way version, the two-way version, or either one?
No, that actually applied to both versions, one and two-way. I've seen in other areas where the striping of the roadway and the bike and walkway type thing has become excessive sometimes. Very bright, sometimes even plastic materials that are used. I would hope that we could minimize that in this case. The other thing that I'm concerned about is curbing, and how curbing can dramatically change the look of a street. So when I was trying to outline some of the different materials and whatnot, it was those types of considerations that I had was, are these going to be intrusions into a historic area?
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a few questions or comments.
Go ahead, Clement.
Thanks. I really appreciated your letter, because my questions are always like that buffer that you were talking about, Mike. I mean, that is, could it be just grass? I would assume that would require more maintenance, which I know the town is always against, but I mean, obviously no plastic, but for safety's sake, I mean, 2 feet is not very wide. And I know we've got up and down Milestone and all the other bike paths, it is grass. It's a natural little berm. This would be much narrower. But if, I think we would all prefer something natural than and of course, and then on the other hand, we'd also prefer something that's not a big color, like you were talking Belgian blocks. I mean, that's used all over the island for driveways, entrances and exits, and that would probably look better. In those renderings, you have that asphalt that just is so jarring, and I'm sure you were just doing that for visual effect. And also, I don't know if this is true, because some of the bike paths look raised, so there's the street down here, and then there's a little 2-foot thing, and then the bike paths seem raised. I don't know if it could all be on the same level. That would visually help it not look so urban. So those were my concerns, which are similar to Sam's. And also, I love the idea that, the picket fence, if we could use that more often, or the, whatever that's called. Just the fencing, the wooden fencing. So
Thanks,
you don't
Clement.
feel like if you're a bike, you're going to fall into the cars. It'd be fascinating. I'm trying to just visualize if I drive into town on a one-way street on Pleasant, and then how do I come out again? Or is it coming out from Main Street out Pleasant that's going to be the one-way? I have trouble with the one-way issue, because I know, I mean, obviously you go in Washington and you come out Orange, or you go in Union, come out Orange. If if you go in Pleasant, how do you come out? It's confusing to me. And I think would complicate congestions. Okay, thank you.
Tom,
I have a number of things I want to say about this, but before I do it, I just want to check in with Sam. I've known Sam for many, many, many years. And myself and another commissioner went and spoke with him quite a long time ago about this, which was not on the radar really yet. But I'd like to know, are you more in favor of alternative 1 or alternative 2, Sam?
Yeah, I thought that question might come up. I'm in favor of alternative 2. And I guess, then you get down whether it's option 1 or option 2. I think there's an argument for going one way. That area is narrow. It's narrow. If you make that, I'd hate to see any improvements that are going to increase the speed of the traffic in that area. And that's not good for pedestrian or bike safety.
I was more interested in your situation where if alternative 1 were to be used, where it's still 2-way, but they make the bike path or the pedestrian path or whatever they want to call it, go into a little bit of your property where they cut down those big trees that you've got there and plant new trees, where there's the split rail fence. How do you guys feel about that?
I personally
don't mean to
feel
put you on the spot, but that's kind of where this is at,
I was trying to make this not just totally feeling self-interest. That in my mind, that would be the most intrusive on the historic integrity of the area.
Okay.
Trees can be replaced, but they do take 50 to 70 years to really come back and serve a good aesthetic purpose. When we did the clearing of that one area of the property that had a lot of sycamore maples on it and whatnot, those trees were, every arborist in town told us that those were doomed. And we thought it was important to get something going there. It also was a bit of a historic restoration because that always used to be an open area. It was a garden area for Sam King.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the short answer is 1 would be the most intrusive.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that because I'm definitely not in favor of 2. I am totally in favor of 1. And I'll tell you why. Having lived here all winter long, with all the craziness that's been going on Pleasant Street and all the directives where at the top of Williams and one ways and both ways and holes and this and that and the traffic going down those side streets, my God, it has been a nightmare living here all winter long. And so if they were to make that part of Pleasant Street, I lived at Joe Souza's cottage behind the barber shop for 9 years. So I'm very, very, very familiar with that very area we're talking about, right across the street where those 4 red cones are. And that's where Back Street comes out. If that becomes one way, the rest of the traffic trying to get from one end of town to the other, in my opinion, is going to be a nightmare. It already is, and what's gone on this winter has proved that. And so, I'm of the opinion, though, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I don't know why we have to even change this in the first place. We've been getting along fine over the years with the pedestrians and the bicycles and all that, and we've got all these other boards that want to add all this new infrastructure. It's just, it's too bad. That's my own opinion, but I'm an old Dutch in the wool Nantucketer, I know, but that's just the way I feel, and I'm not afraid to say it either.
Mr. Chair, through you to Tom, I actually share your opinion, and maybe it's the multi-generation native, but I get that there's want to change things and make things a little bit better, but at the same time, I agree with you, Tom.
Thanks, Holly.
Holly, thanks, Tom. Anyone else? Rita?
Thanks. Through you, Angus, to Mike, I had a question about the piloting the one way, like what specifically, like what would the time period be? Like what would that look like in terms of changes to the road as it exists now?
In the slide deck, I think it was on the second slide, there's a link to a website that does have a plan of what that one-way pilot would look like. Essentially, it's these traffic cones and what barrels and whatnot that are be lined up to, and again, that's just temporary to kind of control traffic. The time period of when that would be done, it's not going to be the spring, probably not the summer. We're still trying to figure that out of when to time this. The thing is, we don't have like a deadline for when this project needs to be built. So we have some time to kind of think this through, to test options, to see what's going to work best for the community. It's not going to be during the sewer project for the reasons that Tom outlined. It's kind of a nightmare right now. So to test something like that out with all the other street closures and whatnot, one, it's going to give us a bad sample. People are already frustrated, as you heard Tom mention. So doing a pilot to kind of test the frustrations, well, we're just going to hear frustrations. If once things get back to normal, I guess, traffic flow wise, if we did do a pilot, say in the fall, which I don't know is even, might be too ambitious, but the spring, next spring, that might be a little more conducive, but short answer, to be determined, but it's not going to be this spring or summer.
Mike, would that straddle season and off season to get a real true idea of how that would impact traffic?
You're asking about the seasonality, whether we should pilot this in the summer or spring or something like this?
If it would straddle both, so that you would see what it is for 10 months and versus the 2 months or 3 months of like intensive summer traffic.
Yeah, ideally you do this in like a May, June kind of time period, something to capture the warmer weather when people are actually out biking. I don't know if people bike a lot. Well, there are, you see them biking in the wintertime, but most of the activity, especially with college getting out and the high school and other things, there'd be more activity to kind of do that in more of a shoulder summer season. I don't know, September might be a good time frame to test this. I don't know if like a high stress period would be a great time to kind of pilot this. Again, I think we would just get a lot of frustration if we did this in like second week of August, third week of August. I don't know if that would be a good idea, but maybe not. So I think we would probably pilot this earlier in the year. If it deemed successful, keep extending it through 4th of July weekend and just until we see the stress points are getting too out of control, and then either it works and we keep it, or it doesn't work and okay, call off the testing.
Thanks, Mike. Abby?
I just had a question, Mike. I hear what Tom and Holly were saying. Are we concerned that the way like bikers go to town right now, I think everyone knows it's kind of like they follow the path that's available. Are we worried that by adding this bike path that then it will add kind of like this additional confusion with cyclists? Because like, is there a desire? Like, have we heard a desire from cyclists that they want an additional path, that there's too much cycling traffic today? Is that why like they're looking for it? Or as Tom and Holly had said, is this something that like people are trying to improve, but not necessarily something that needs to improve? Just curious if like there's been a lot of input from the cycling community that like there's not enough ways to get into town today.
I would say just by coordinating with our Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, a lot of the members there are bicyclists and avid cyclists. And yeah, we do hear that. And quite honestly, I was an avid cyclist when I lived on island, and this section by Mr. Phelan's property is kind of one of the areas that I would avoid. If you're biking and there's the queuing that you have in the summertime, which it backs up to Williams Lane along. There's a, I mean, there's no other place to go as a cyclist. So I just avoided it. Even though it is a designated bike route. If we look at some of our maps and stuff like this, you'll see that there is a line, like this is one of the desirable corridors to get from the Mid-Island area into town. It's one of the options, as well as the in-town bike path along that route, or you could go, Sparks to Prospect Street and go by the mill, that area, to kind of get through this area. If we're going to, we do have goals of being more of an active transportation community with a lot of biking and walking taking place rather than driving. That's something that we're really trying to curb, is the number of trips that people use their cars and drive alone. We're trying to reduce that and perhaps take advantage of other modes of transportation. Not everybody's going to do this, but if we provide facilities, the idea is that maybe more people will use that as an option, and we try to encourage that. We need that to happen. And quite frankly, looking at some of the stats in recent years, like that, with traffic growing, safety become more of a concern. We really haven't been, there is a lack of facilities in a lot of areas. I'll say that nicely. I guess it's a nice way to put it. Things have been trending in the wrong direction. We've seen the rate of commuters who commute to work by biking and walking reduced, using public transportation reduced, and driving alone has been going up. And that just stresses out our parking inventory. It stresses out the intersections, and it's not a good, fun environment that contributes to historic integrity. I would argue. A lot of people would argue that. So this is just providing more options and facilities is a goal of ours. We need to change the trends of our driving habits, and this would help address that. I hope that answers your question, Abby.
I would like to say something from what Mr. Burns just said. Because people are using, or the town wanting to force people to use more bicycle transportation and drive less and things like that, I don't think changing the rural look of places like William Street or Lower Pleasant Street is the answer to that. I think that less building would help that a lot.
Thanks, Tom. Holly, I see your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to ask through you to Mike. One of the things that we've heard a lot of us, the commissioners, say about that character and setting, and I think that's very important to retain. But I also will say, as somebody who, when I was in high school, I used to park at the Bayberry cluster, whatever you call it, near Marine Home Center, park there and walk to work when I worked for an NPT, actually. And I would either go down Orange Street or I would go down Pleasant, depending on what side I had parked on. Pleasant Street was not the way to go. Always Orange Street was. And I'm wondering, Pleasant Street, specifically from Five Corners to the Phelan's property, there is already an asphalt sidewalk. It's not in the greatest of shape. And looking at these renderings, there didn't seem to be any want or desire or even to even look at connecting to that, because that is a public sidewalk that exists, that already has that historic character and setting that's probably been there from the 30s and 40s. So I'm curious if there's any way to utilize the existing features, expand them, but you're not impeding the current roadway traffic wise. Just a thought.
Thanks, Holly.
When we had met with Sam years ago, I think we kind of talked about something like that, Sam, extending that sidewalk on the backside of your trees so we didn't have to cut them down, maybe leveling it off a little bit, and then trying to figure out some way to get across the real dip there where the big garden used to be that you've had all cleared out until we get down to the corner of William Street. And that seemed like a fairly viable thing to me. I mean, I don't know, but it's on private property. That's why we had to get you involved. But rather than doing all this other stuff that alternative 1 and 2 want to do. I don't know.
I remember that as well, Tom. Sam?
I remember having that discussion also. And I think the primary problem here, in terms of historic character and whatnot, is the area in front of Joe's house, 61 Pleasant Street, where you do have those trees that have been there for God knows how long.
Yeah.
To be able to put some type of walkway up in the field area, and also there are 2 or 3 invasive trees up in that area. I think that's a simple case. There would be the need to get permission from Joe and his wife to do some kind of sidewalk on the other side of the trees and preserve them. I will say those are trees and they're towards the end of their life. So there's a need to get something else going in order to preserve this historic look of a tree-lined street. I would also urge that something be done up, in terms of trees to the closer to 5 Corners also. The area where the King Garden used to be,
yeah.
When we did the clearing last year, and we also were careful to put the trees that we planted 15 feet away from the road. So there's definitely room there to put in something. And we actually had devised a series of alternatives that I could share with the Mike and his committee at some time, as to how you might be able to do walkways that are not as intrusive in that area. So, Tommy, I don't mean to say that the family is opposed to anything going on there. I mean to say that it wants it to be minimal. And the idea of building a sidewalk on the other side of the trees there certainly has been discussed. I have no idea whether Joe and Patty are in favor of that.
I just wanted to bring that out because I think that's important. It sounded like a fairly decent alternative, and Holly was kind of on that, and it was a worthwhile thing to think about. And I think this board and anybody else that has to hear this story ought to hear about that as well.
Right. And if they go down the road of 2-way and preserving the 2-way, I think that's an alternative that needs to be looked at.
And Mr. Chair, I have a comment too on that. Because I in some of these renderings, it looks like the bike path and the sidewalk would have to be built up. Because I know at the Phelan's, it dips and there's actually no sidewalk, but the contour of the land, if you could follow the contour of the present land, which I think is what you're talking about, it would be more intrusive on your properties. But it would be certainly a more interesting bike trail and pedestrian trail. It would have some character of not being just smack next to all the cars. It would still follow the contours of the land, and that would make it feel more rural, but more problematic for you.
Mickey, please go ahead.
So I would just to add to that similar sentiment, I guess I would be in favor of supporting the alternative one, the 2-way traffic zone. I know, sorry, Sam, but it cuts more into your side. But I think it'll work better traffic flow wise tremendously. And I think it could also be done in a way that there's a buffer between, unlike the diagram that Mike has presented showing the sidewalk right along the roadside. I think it can be done. And I think that this was discussed to bring it into the property some more, have it follow the contours, and provide that buffer, safety buffer, and also a visual buffer. I think it would look a whole lot better if it weren't right on the edge of the pavement. So that's what I'm thinking.
I'm not sure that a lot of the commissioners know that the old farmhouse where these trees are and where Sam is a very old historic house. And what he's talking about at the original part of this discussion, keeping the historic area the way it is, it's a rural area, and in order to keep it as rural as it can be in 2024, I think putting a sidewalk on the backside of those trees and keeping it two-way will go a long way than cutting it up and making it much more urban.
I have to agree with that. There, Pleasant Street changes so much between Sparks Ave and Main Street, or even Five Corners. Um, there are areas that the sidewalk is there and it's removed, like it's up a hill, and separated by grass. There are areas where there's a curb that sets the sidewalk at a different level. Um, and then there's areas that there's no sidewalk at all, and is I think a very scary area for a pedestrian, especially in front of the Phelan's land there. And so, the bikes can move along with traffic. Um, and I agree that two-way makes a lot more sense than one way. We're already burdened with our arteries coming and going from town, and this is a major one. Um, but there really isn't a place for pedestrians now, and you sort of take your life in your own hands when you walk that stretch. And so a sidewalk would be helpful, but even in the sidewalk plan, unless you actually devote a lane to it, is just going to be for pedestrians. There isn't going to be a bike path there. And there really isn't a bike path for the whole length. Like bikes are in the road. But an offset path, I think, on the west side of the trees, in the Phelan's area, would maintain that narrow, tree-lined part of Pleasant Street that really is charming and has a particular setting and feeling that is mentioned hasn't really changed for many, many decades. So Mike, so you haven't really gotten any feedback from anyone except for the bicycle and pedestrian committee, and that was to do a pilot?
Well, we got a recommendation from BPAC to pilot the one-way. Again, everybody kind of understands the stresses that a one-way option puts on the traffic flow. That's a shared opinion. Traffic safety work group, which is the police chief, fire chief, DPW director, they've heard this issue as well. They have not provided a recommendation, but I think the sentiment is still there that the two-way traffic flow is kind of critical for circulation reasons. There's probably some other recommendations that could be put in place to kind of relieve that stress and the burden of an improved traffic flow or reduce delays. The roundabout at Four Corners is one of those solutions that would help immensely with that. Mr. Chair, I think I also hear that you really would like to explore having two-way, but also improving the existing sidewalk from Five Corners down to the Phelan property, have that sidewalk be as wide as possible so it could be, and I think I heard this, perhaps shared with pedestrians and bicyclists until it gets to the Phelan property. I'll note that the property between the Phelans and the sidewalk, there's really not there's a structure, a retaining wall in place that if we had two-way traffic flow along Pleasant Street right at that corner, it would neck down to about 5 or 6 feet. But perhaps there's opportunity to have at least an 8-foot wide sidewalk, a majority of the length of this section of Pleasant Street, with that one bottleneck right at the retaining wall, right at the Phelan property to like 5 or 6 feet, and then open back up, deviate from the road and follow the contours with an 8-foot, 10-foot wide path, and then marry back up with Williams Lane to, again, try to provide at least an 8-foot wide sidewalk, so that bikes and pedestrians can share it, going the rest of the length, similar to what the strategy is for Sparks Avenue, widening that sidewalk out to 8 feet so they can be used by pedestrians and bicyclists. We could try that, but again, that's very impactful. If we follow the contours of the property to the feelings, I think we probably need to do one. We don't really have an alignment for that just yet, so that's something that needs to be developed. And then maybe some visual renderings of what that would look like. Other materials like split rail fencing. I'm not sure what the strategy is for the trees that was mentioned, that they might be at the end of their life. I don't know, but at least I guess the idea or the sense, if this is the environment that you want to preserve, is having this tree-lined road, keep that area kind of designated for replacement trees and just cycle them in, so you can always have a canopy along that one section of corridor and with the path kind of into the Phelan property. But again, that's going to require an easement, a very significant easement from what we've already calculated. Again, if it's it's not for me to decide this. This is going to go to the select board and the county commissioners. If it gets to an eminent domain taking, I think what we want to avoid is any type of contentious taking where we're challenging the value of real estate or anything like this. I think that's what we're trying to avoid, and that perhaps we can work on a solution to where this is we can acquire the right of way for this in a manner that's acceptable to the family.
And I don't know nobody's talking about eminent domain or anything like that. I'm 77 years old, and I've been using that sidewalk that from 5 corners down to where you're talking about, where there's that retaining wall, my whole life. But whether I'm driving it or walking it or using a bicycle, and it's, why can't we just have a sidewalk that size? I mean, the people that are pedestrians as well as people that are on bicycles share that right now, all day, every day. It's not a big deal. Why do we need to, talk about eminent domain and making it an 8 or 10-foot thing in the Phelan's property? My God. I mean, it makes it so much more complicated. Why can't we just have a nice 6-foot thing that goes down there and be done with it? I mean, I just don't get it. It just, the town tries to, they continue to make things way more difficult than they need to be here. It bugs me. I know this is your job, Mike. I'm not blaming you for this. I know you get paid to do all this stuff, but I'm talking. That's why I'm on this board. You want to hear what I got to say? There it is.
No, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the comments and everything. I'm just that's why we're sharing 2 alternatives. Here's one that's very impactful. Here's one that's less impactful, and I appreciate all the comments, whether it's whatever direction it goes in. So thanks, Tom. No hard feelings.
With the idea that there is 2-way traffic, I wasn't suggesting that there would be any more than a sidewalk added, and it would be, where there's some places where it's separate and higher, and other places where it's beside the road, right. And where the Phelan's property is, ideally it would be on the far side of the trees, whether they're kept or circulated in and out, but that would be more of a sidewalk pedestrian scale as opposed to a wide modern bike path, because there really isn't one before or after. So it seems to make sense to somehow incorporate the bikes on the road, but that's me. How are the other commissioners feeling?
I agree with that statement completely.
Anyone else? Holly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I kind of, I guess, wanted to mention I guess the concept of retaining this area as it was the rural, Newtown Road or Newtown. It's outside of the fence way back when. I mean, this 5 corners. This is a part of our survey effort that we're trying to accomplish. And there's layers of history that are still there, still present. But this chunk of I think Pleasant Street, the Phelan's area, if you will, even across the street that the Oliver family owned, that 3 Bay, they had all those children in, Val Oliver's family, right up against the road, you know, the same 1840s, 1860s era, before, you know, the people, I would say, migrated out towards the Middle Island and outside. I mean, you got to remember. So this is that, almost as if it's that snippet of ruralness, I guess, if that's even a word, of Nantucket, of Mid Island. That it has been very important to retain those character features of having the street trees, that canopy. If we can have some type of replacement program, if we can utilize the ups and downs. And then I also thought, you know, and this may have come up when we were first talked about a couple of years ago, but, you know, is there a possibility, I know, Mike, that there's certain ADA compliant surfaces that are or that are porous, that are compacted, like an aggregate of some sort. Is there a way to take a change in material from the asphalt? Because I would say that the asphalt that's existing in front of like 49 all the way to the corner, and I'm trying to remember the family that lives in that corner, has been there for many, many years. If that could be an idea, instead of having it all complete asphalt, because we know that there's different grades of asphalt, and we do know that there's different compactions, and that would give it more of a rural feeling versus having it all one type of material. I think those type of things would be, I think, and I don't want to speak for this commission, but I think would be beneficial of looking at those alternatives, and making it so everybody would, I guess, be a happy medium, because there's this this need to retain, I think, the two-way for traffic flow. I drove taxi for 5 years growing up, and I have no idea how the additional traffic, how anybody would want to drive taxi now. And if that was a one-way, and I'm trying to think in my head how to get from point A to point B, I think the two-way, my opinion, would be better. And maybe if there's a way of looking at these different uniqueness instead of going about the entire complete streets way, I think would be beneficial. And I again, I don't want to speak for this commission, but I'm very grateful for this conversation. I think this is good, and I would assume everybody else is happy. So that was just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. I think you make a really good point about there being varying conditions. And so a one set uniform path from point A to point B may not necessarily be the most successful option in this section of town. Any other comments?
In terms of different materials, I mean, like asphalt is pretty universal. It's easy and it's very smooth. It works for everybody. But you know, the areas of some areas of the island, the town used to roll in like shells or sand or something into the surface of the asphalt, and that changed the character of it. It made it feel a little less formal and urban. So I think that could still be a possibility and give us that texture we're looking for with the asphalt.
Excellent point, Mickey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I approve of that, what Mickey, because I know out in Wisconsin, when they've used asphalt, they on North Gully, it's just like, it has not, it's still black and gross. And I know they did used to roll in shells and sand, and it does tamper it down quite a bit.
Well, there's different levels of aggregate. There's different levels of concrete. And you also got to look at, even if you look towards Pleasant Street from Five Corners down to Orange Street, we know that there's different materials and different, eras, if you will. So I think that's important. It's what's appropriate. Some areas it's okay to, I personally think, to change from, say, if you've got brick on this side of the sidewalk and brick over this way, and you're flanked by both of them, but you're concrete, it's okay to change. And those are type of things that we're looking at. But really that change in material, if at all possible, when you're going from the urbanness of downtown out to where we're all calling is a rural aspect of Pleasant Street, I think that would be awesome to retain it.
Thanks, Holly. Abby?
I was just wondering, Mike, because there are so many trees and we want to preserve the trees, are there certain materials that are more tree friendly? Because I know obviously sometimes depending on where you are downtown, the roots will kind of like uproot, and like people are saying asphalt, like asphalt is easy, but asphalt isn't probably very tree friendly because of the roots. So I didn't know, are there other materials that are more tree friendly?
Well, I would say brick, because you can always reset them with some more stone dust to kind of accommodate root growth. I think for this application, I think we try to stay out of the root area. There was a tree, and I'm trying to think of the what I am thinking of, the Cliff Road bike path, and when that got extended from Crooked Lane down to Sherburne Turnpike, there was a great big tree that had the same kind of concerns. So the idea was to have a certain distance away from the tree that the path would align to kind of not disturb the root bulb at all. So I think that's what we would do here as well, is just avoiding type of conflicts with the roots. And again, you're getting further away from the road in that instance, but that's probably something we want to do here, instead of having, say, red brick that you have to like reset every few years to smooth out. If it was asphalt, there's cracks in asphalts all over the place because of root growth. And that's just something that it has to be maintained. But the way to minimize that is just stay out of the root bulb area and try to contain the root growth to not interfere with the path itself.
Okay, thank
you. To that point, I think, yeah, anything that's pervious, brick or stone or some sort of stone dust or anything that isn't, asphalt or concrete is going to help the trees. But you also, look at all of the mature trees downtown where we've got, asphalt going along one side and brick on the other side and, stuff in between. So it's not as though a tree has to be, out in the field and clear, all the way out to its canopy perimeter to keep it alive and preserved. Are there any other comments about what we've heard so far? I feel like, Mike, what you're looking for is obviously a support letter for some iteration of this project. If I'm reading the commission correctly, I think that they're looking for another alternative that still maintains two-way, but maybe more creative with where the sidewalk and or bike path would be to just take into consideration the specific concerns in that stretch between Five Corners and Williams Lane.
I think that's an excellent way of putting it.
How do the commissioners feel?
Well, I think maybe try to say something about using materials that fit better with the historic nature instead of bringing in, try to use grass, try to use split rail fencing, stay away from bright colors and plastic and
Curbing and stuff that makes it more urban.
right.
Bright paint. Yeah.
And road signs. We haven't mentioned road signs. I know that was something that Mr. Phelan brought up too. Small road signs that are. I mean, once again, they're standardized, I guess. But if they could be the smallest ones on wooden posts, things like that, they go a long way to preserve the historic feel. And I appreciate this presentation. I think this is very nice to have the Historic Commission involved. So thank you for hearing our comments.
Sam?
I just wanted to ask Mike the question. It seems as though the committee has raised the possibility, primarily Tom, of just doing a pedestrian way and not necessarily a dual purpose way. Did the committee look at that at all?
The alternative one, as it is now, is just a 5 foot wide sidewalk. That's not to say that couldn't be used by cyclists. There is in our local bylaws and state statute that outside of business districts, cyclists can ride on sidewalks. Just in like the downtown areas, like Main Street and those other areas, you can't do that. So I think that would be appropriate here. I would, because that's an inevitability, and that, if we said that bicyclists could not use the sidewalk, they would still use it anyway. So that would that would just turn into an enforcement issue. So good design would probably just make this as conducive to both, knowing that that's going to happen, as possible. So I think we would try to see if we can't get at least 8 feet. If it necks down to 5 feet in some areas, I think that's fine. But if we did provide a 5 foot sidewalk, I think that we could still get by with that. It's just my preference would be to make it as wide as possible, knowing that cyclists are going to use it.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm looking to all you commissioners, what the next step is if we just let the plan develop a little bit further with our concerns playing a factor and see where we end up. Does that make sense?
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Please go ahead, Mike.
I do appreciate this conversation. I think this is adding so much value to the project. And it does seem like the two-way is probably the preferred traffic flow. And there does seem to be another desire for another option that preserves this canopied area and provides more of a sidewalk feel in some areas. The materials, I'd almost like to flush that out a little bit more and just ask this group if this topic came up for the in-town bike path, the railroad causeway through Goose Pond, and the solution there was to do a chip seal application. I'm not sure if the commission knows about this or feels that was successful or anything like this. Mickey, we discussed this with the Commission on Disability. We wanted to have an accessible surface, but also have it be aesthetically pleasing. So we picked this chip seal option to where it's asphalt with a rubberized emulsion and then rolled aggregate into the top of it. I don't know if that turned out to be successful or not, but some kind of input from this committee on that or an alternative material, I think would be extremely helpful.
I would add that as long as it maintains more of a rural atmosphere as opposed to an urban atmosphere, I would be more tend to agree with that. And I'm still adamant about 8 feet. I mean, I know 10 feet, 8 feet, and all that. If we could get it to 6 feet and compromise, I would be all in favor of that.
Thank you, Tom. Abby?
I think I pretty much agree with everyone else. Like, I think that we do, as you summed it up, like we want maybe an alternative that's a little different than what's here, because I agree with like definitely not having the modern look and feel, like Clement said, like, we don't want bright paint, we don't want plastic. I think the curbing, I would agree. I also would be nervous, and Tom, I agree with you. Like, I think the more narrow we can get it, the better. So I'd be definitely nervous to put curbing anyway, because I think that would probably even be more dangerous because we're more likely to see accidents and things like that. So I think the more we have an option that preserves the, rural look and feel, but also I do agree with the reality of the two-way. Like, I agree with everyone. I think it would be too crazy to imagine it one way. And I also think unfortunately, even if it became like one way, I don't think the desired, like the reason people would want it to be one way and then the outcome, I don't think that would be the same. So I don't think it would achieve the goal. So I would look to see a slightly different option. So I guess I support everything else everybody's saying. Whatever we can see that is an option, but I definitely agree, like preserving the trees, preserving the canopy, like that look and feel. I like how Holly put it, like a snippet of ruralness, like that is a really pretty area. I lived on Pleasant Street when I first moved here, and it is a nice, like, even though you're close to downtown, it is like a nice quiet area. And so as much as we can preserve that, openness, like Clement mentioned the wooden fence, like I think that would be, ideal.
Thanks, Abby. Mickey, in closing on this one?
Well, it sounds like Mike is really wanting a letter from us to sort of endorse, at least maybe just put our thoughts into words. Am I correct, Mike?
I think so. It is not just for my benefit. I think a lot of the other decision-making boards would benefit from input in writing from this group. I think there's a lot of value that we've discussed here, and I think putting that into writing is again, I'm going back to what Sam had provided in his context sensitive. Like, we need to demonstrate that we're in a consensus and we have a shared vision here. So I think that would be a good way to kind of codify it. If we had something in writing, we could share a letter with the select board, who's ultimately going to make this decision, as well as the other boards, and kind of share that and get their input as well. There might be a lot of agreement there if we can just provide that in writing. Yes, I think that'd be a great idea.
Can I make just one quick comment, Mickey, before you say to what Mike just said? This discussion is completely in our wheelhouse. That's one of the things that this board does for this town that we're talking about right now.
That's right. Clement?
No, I think we should write the letter. I think we should include as much, once again, this falls to you, Angus, and you will submit it to us. So I guess we should make a motion that we will send a letter to whoever you send it to, and recommend that we would like to have the rural nature preserved and give some various ideas about how we feel, and
About materials to use and not to use. Holly?
I just thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a notice, and it kind of goes back on what Tom just said. Is this commission is an advocacy board towards the town and the select board? And again, with what Mike said, the select board is the one that makes the ultimate decision, but your input is highly sought and needed. So I think maybe having some sort of mention in the letter of one as the historical advocacy commission towards the National Historic and Local Historic District for the select board, and also acknowledging and appreciating being involved in this conversation at such an early stage is also appreciative. So maybe kind of put that in there as well, if you're also inclined.
Thanks, Holly.
No, I think we do appreciate, because sometimes when our commission was first formed, as Mr. Chair will remember, I mean, we were getting these designs so late in the game that there was no time for us to have any influence. So I very much appreciate seeing these plans ahead of time, and if not that we're going to change everybody's mind, but it's something, I think.
Thanks.
Well, I will add, Clement, I mean, I think what happened with the milestone and Pulpus was a really good example of us being involved from the beginning, and then being able to have our input brought forward. And thank you, Mike, for working closely with us. I think that's a good example of showing that when we are brought in sooner rather than later, we're able to talk through our concerns. And as you pointed out, Clement, in the past, maybe we've been included too late to really have a say, where it's more like this is already what's been decided. So I think that this is a good example of us being able to partner and thoughtfully provide our input. And as Tom very much pointed out, like we are the voice of the historic preservation. And so it's great for us to be here in the beginning and provide our guidance and then be able to kind of move things forward. So I'm hopeful this will be another example of that.
And I think just to add to that, the graphics and the pictures that Mike provided us on the Sconset Road were very helpful. And what he's done here today, I mean, I think one of the reasons we've had such a good discussion is he presented this very, very graphically and clearly, so we could all see what was going on, and I appreciate that.
Thank you for that, Mike. We all appreciate that and being part of the process sooner than later. I think this letter, I mean, it sounds like this is something that that obviously you want feedback sooner than later, but we could put a letter together and review it at our next meeting and then issue it. It's a little tricky because we're not all meeting as far as open meeting law to like have the letter circulate for us to all be able to read it and implement our thoughts on it. We certainly don't want to get in the way of the time budget. Is there time for that, or is this something that would be needed before our next meeting?
It would be, I would be happy to attend your next meeting to talk out maybe some framework of a letter as you're getting your thoughts together. There really isn't I guess the time frame really is we have our consultant under contract through November, but that's really not a deadline. As I've tried to represent to the NPDC and with the select board is there really isn't like a deadline to get this project built. There's not a grant that's, we're not losing funding at all. I think let's take our time, make a good decision and get a project together that's going to exceed the expectations of everyone and everyone benefits. So I think, I've gone through work coordinated with the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee as key stakeholders for their interests, traffic safety, and now with you all, and I'm getting good input all along the way. So I think we should do our due diligence and try to think through what the content of your letter is going to be, and I'm happy to kind of coordinate with you next meeting after that, going into the future, however long this takes, and if this. If you want to set a deadline of like 6 months, we can do something like that, but I think that'd just be arbitrary. But I guess the point is that let's not rush this. And I'm happy to attend 2 or 3 meetings to kind of get a letter kind of developed that's going to cover everything that we need to cover and that will benefit these other decision-making boards as well.
So, commissioners, Rita and I, like the last letter, we could come up with that and circulate it around, or we could just review it at our next meeting. It sounds like we've got a little time to work with. Tom,
I think you guys might give it a stab so that we could at least look at it, and then all of us can make our own corrections to it or add and subtract to it, and then at the next meeting we can talk about it and maybe formulate it then.
okay. Getting a thumbs up from Holly. Does that sound good to the commissioners?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think that's a good idea. That way we can at least review the draft with Mike before we officially send it in case there's anything we need to add, take out. So I say, let's get a good version of the draft circulated. And then Mike, if you can come to our next meeting, we can talk through the letter and then we can make any edits then.
Sounds good. Would someone like to make that motion?
We'll move.
Tom? Thank you, Tom. Second?
Second.
Thanks, Clement. On your motion, Tom.
Aye.
Clement?
Aye.
Nikki?
Aye.
Abby?
Aye.
As well. We will work on a draft. Mike, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you,
It was
Mike.
very helpful.
I appreciate y'all. Thank y'all for having me. And thank you, Mr. Phelan, for participating as well. I think he's kind of really the genesis of starting this conversation and leading to a productive conversation. So I appreciate your participation in this, Mr. Phelan.
My pleasure.
Thank
See
you
Sam.
from the commission as well. Pleasure having you on. And please keep the suggestions coming, and certainly as we discuss this, you're welcome to join in any of the meetings.
Thank you.
All right, well, we've got a little time left to do the rest of the agenda. We can go ahead and move on. I think, have we lost Rita?
Yes, she said she
Okay.
had to go early anyway.
Okay,
Yeah, she dropped right around 11, just as an FYI.
Yes.
okay.
Mr. Chair, as far as the next conversation goes, I was working with our energy coordinator, Lauren Sinatra, and Andy Bacino, who is a HERS rater and knows a lot about what's going on with the stretch code stuff. But I guess I thought they were going to be attending today, but they may have, I don't know the reason. And they could have emailed me, but I've actually technically been off this week with school vacation. So I don't know if that's something. It obviously is germane to annual town meeting coming up, which we also have listed on our agenda. But it's more importantly germane to the historic district. And this has been on my radar for a couple of years now, and that's how long changes to the stretch code and what that means to our historic districts. What that means, and frankly, there are people in the preservation, planning, contracting world who are aware of these changes and what it means, what it could mean to our historic district when we consider anything built up to 1975 is potentially contributing towards the local and national district. So there's a lot of structures that would be benefit to be under what we would maybe consider either a variance, depending on the way that the state building code would go on this, or two, would be able to be exempt under the substantial compliance section with a historic determination from the HDC. So what direction that goes, I don't know. But what the germaneness to the annual town meeting is that there's a proposed warrant article to get out of the stretch code. And my understanding from talking to my colleague Lauren is that there would be ramifications to our green communities designation with the state, and where we already are with the stretch code in general. It sounds like to me from even talking to other folks that are in the know more than I am, is that this would that the state is still in the infancy of trying to figure out how this is going to work in general. So again, I really wanted to have these subject matter experts. Another subject matter expert who actually attended DOER, the Department of Energy. I can't remember what the entire acronym stands for, but DOER is involved with a lot of that stuff. They had a webinar not that long ago, and Joe Topham was involved as somebody from Nantucket and saying, hey, this is of concern. So it might even be beneficial to have him talk, because this isn't something that the state's going to make a determination on anytime soon. My understanding, it's not like we need to have it done now. But I just wanted to bring that up and how it relates to annual town meeting. So I'm sorry that they weren't able to attend today, but if that's something that the commission would like me to pursue even further on getting them here, as well as Joe Topham, I will do that.
I would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Be helpful to have Lauren there. But Holly, from what you know so far, what is your recommendation that we shouldn't be getting rid of the stretch code? We just want provisions to be able to accommodate historic structures so they aren't compromised for the stretch code.
Correct. The latter. Yep.
And is how if we were to voice that opinion for a town meeting, what's the best way to do that?
That I'm not too sure of. And that would be something I could reach out to Lauren on with timing. Because again, I know she's against this proposal. And I would assume that she's been, requested of her opinions on from town administration. So I think she'd be the best one to find out how this commission could assist with that.
I'm assuming it would be some statement or letter from us that would be read at town meeting, just giving our opinion about it. Commissioners, what do you say?
Mr. Chair, I had no idea what I was reading or looking at. So, I mean, I need a huge education to be able to say. So I would bow to the experts.
Let's
I
put
mean-
this off and wait till we can hear from the others.
Yeah, I think we'd really need someone who knows enough about it, but I would say even if we write a letter, I don't know if it goes, like, I don't think it would be read at town meeting. I think it would maybe go to, but at this point, because they've already gone to, like, I think it would go to the financial committee who recommends the warrant. But if someone wanted to get up at town meeting, someone could say, this is our stance. But I agree that before we really take a stance one way or the other, I mean, I agree with Holly that from what I've heard about this, I think the most important thing is that there is a solid exemption process in place.
Yes.
So that we're able to protect properties and you don't have to bring them up to this crazy energy code that's super strict.
Yeah.
But I think that Lauren's concerns are that with this article, it would jeopardize our town standing. And I think we don't want to necessarily do that. So rather than us kind of reject it outright, find, as Holly pointed out, like a path forward to just protect our properties. And I think the good thing with this is we can look to other towns in the state, because we're obviously not going to be the only town that has historic properties that are going to need to be protected. And we can work closely with those other towns to understand their exemption process and how they're crafting it and try and partner with them. That would be my thought.
That's a great.
I would agree on that, Mr. Chair, on what Abby said to see if we can work with other communities. I will say this, we are the most unique out of the entire bunch with the being the largest contiguous. So, and having such a large expanse and time frame of our period of significance where, I mean, again, a structure built in 1975, it can be deemed contributing. So that structure should also be able to be exempt from this. And what this is very similar, and I will say this, when we were going through the Resilient Nantucket Design Guidelines with our consultant, that was something that I brought up in lieu of having an already established opinion, if you will, on whether or not something is contributing or non-contributing. And under the Secretary of Interior standards, that is what I am qualified to do as preservation planner. At the same time, our NHL update does have that very vaguely updated. And then our survey plan that we all got with PAL created with our CLG funding also takes that into a step further, but without having the more or less done individually as what the historic determination process does. That's why we have to do that for each individual structure that comes before the HDC to elevate a structure not to the full compliance as the design guidelines requires, based on the guidance that both FEMA and the Secretary of Interior created. So I say that to say, we have an established process for those structures not having to be fully elevated like structures in Charleston, right, Clement?
Right.
But at the same time, how can we get the folks at DOER to understand that these structures need to have that same respect, if you will, and not have to be forced into these requirements if they are a contributing structure. And again, having them understand, which I think what Mr. Topham was trying to do in the webinar he attended, is to get them to understand that Nantucket's unique. Nantucket doesn't fall in that same cookie cutter category. And the state needs to realize that, we should be able to have, whether it's through our process internally with the HDC or it's through a variance process with the state. We need to come up with some sort of solution to combat this, and what is the best way to do that. So I'm glad we're having this little tidbit of a conversation on it. It's important. But I will work on getting this for our subject matter experts to attend next meeting.
Yeah, and Holly, I'm just thinking of places that are, you know, they have better lobbyists and more money than us, like Cambridge. I'm sure that the preservation community in Cambridge, though, it has some sort of plan that they're working on. So that's why I'm saying it might be worth us connecting with them, because I'm sure they have more money than us and they have a plan. So it'd be worth just checking in with them. In other places, you know, throughout the state, like Plymouth will have, you know, New Bedford. I know we've worked with them. They'll have
Yep.
Probably thoughts on this as well. So just thought we might want to check in with them to see maybe they already are developing their exemption process or not. So
Perfect.
Holly, you said that this was, you know, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's been in progress for years and will be. But
Yes.
but as you say, you know, we have town meeting that will happen before our next meeting. So I mean, how can we help in the best outcome with the article that's before the town?
And I think that would be something for me to talk with Lauren on and get more of the facts on what are the ramifications of the proposed warrant article to the stretch code. What does that mean entirely? And I think having that clarity would be beneficial. And even if that's something that I can get from her to send to you all, so you all are aware of what that means. Maybe in this case there isn't, because there isn't time to really make a motion or a full discussion on it, but maybe that's something where you all know what that ramifications are as individuals, and maybe not opine as a commission on it at this time. But sure, definitely I think having a opinion on what that means to our historic structures, I think, is important. So again, having those subject matter experts, I think, on both sides of the coin are going to be beneficial, because we do need to get the state to acknowledge Nantucket's historic uniqueness and figure out what is the best solution moving forward with these new requirements with the energy code.
Holly, do you have counterparts in any of the other Massachusetts communities that, to Appy's point, we could sort of get some intel on what other communities are doing about this stretch code and how we could respond?
I got a couple of ideas how I can get some information on that. Yep.
Okay. Maybe just keep us abreast so that, you know, when we show up to town meeting, you know, we could stand up as individuals and state something as we learn it.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Holly. Anyone else? Okay, so let's so that kind of segues us to the articles of preservation concern with the town meeting. Are there any others that anyone would like to discuss? Don't all jump at once. Okay.
I'm not gonna lie, I have not read the entire warrant, so
There's still some time.
Large.
yeah,
Yeah.
I know it's long. I know there's a lot of focus on the short-term rental discussion that I know.
Yes. On
And
that point,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
personally, I come across as short-term rental has been part of our history since the end of the whaling era. And I think if we're not cognizant of that historic fact, I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot. And that short-term rentals is an issue that I think people are very passionate on both sides of the coin, but that everything in moderation, that we can't just completely nix it, but we can't completely just let it free for all. Something needs to be done moderately, because again, at the end of the day, it is part of our identity. That's my opinion.
Well, that's certainly reasonable thought and probably shared by everybody here. Definitely part of history, but also we know how much history is actually getting removed as a result of it. So yeah, moderation. Any other comments about articles? Okay. Well, the certified local government training. So there needs to be someone between the HDC and the Historical Commission, at least one person or one from each.
At least just one person for the entire CLG, which is both commissions. Frankly, I would think it would be beneficial to have, one from the Historical Commission, since the HDC, they're kind of busy. If I've already signed up for one of the meetings, if somebody else wanted to, I think that would be great. I think more the merrier is what Jen was saying too. So if everybody or anybody, it doesn't necessarily matter, as long as we have at least one person for representing the CLG besides staff would be great.
Angus, I was gonna sign up, but obviously happy to have other people join me. But if at the very least, I'll be one person from our commission.
The HDC thanks you.
I'm sure they do, because I don't know if they've gone to every training, but I'll at least go. But and what I'll do is, when I go, usually what I do is I send you guys, if you can't all make it for whatever reason, obviously don't feel obligated. I'll send you guys, they provide the slides afterward, and I'll send those around. So even if, you guys can't make it for whatever reason, I'm happy to share all of the materials.
Thanks, Abby.
And-
That would really be helpful. I was going to sign up, and I'd encourage anyone else or everyone else to do it as well.
The more the merrier. And on that note, I did send it to everybody, both commissions and staff. So obviously, if everybody could attend, or a big majority, I think that would be beneficial. And I did want to mention that this is the first real CLG training that's come from MHC since we've become a CLG. So I think that's also something to note. That was one thing that I asked the state as soon as we became a CLG, like, where is this special training that was said that we were going to receive as a CLG? So I think that's all important to acknowledge.
Well, and is this, I was trying to see a location or whatever. I just assume it's Zoom.
It's Zoom, and there's 2 separate dates. I think they're
Two
trying
separate
to
dates,
accommodate. Yep, they're trying to accommodate everybody's schedule. It's either one in the daytime or one in the evening, which I thought was also helpful, because they do know that most people that are in the commissions are volunteers. You're volunteering your time to do what you do. So
I also think that it's important that the more people from this commission that do that, since the town became a CLG through us. So I think, we're at least guardians of it. We should probably, try and have everybody go there.
Sounds good.
Right.
Okay, so I think we're down to the our
wire.
thanks
I
for
can-
pulling that up and sending it in. Do you want to go through those?
Yeah,
Abby?
I'll go over this quickly, and then we can go through the approve the minutes. So not a lot of major changes, really just noting that this month we did this past month we sent out a bunch of letters. Thank you, Angus and Holly, for getting them done. We sent out the 2 section 106 reviews, and the updated Easton Street letter. Also, as Holly mentioned, we recently got the batch 5 that came on the 11th.
David Gray, I did want to mention that about the sewer force main. He did
Oh.
reach out to me recently, actually last week, to get together this week, but I told him it's school vacation, so it's gonna have to be next week. So at some point, I will have some updates for you guys. I'll be going out there physically out in the field, looking at things with him, which I thought was nice.
Great. So David Gray contacted Holly. You guys are gonna go do a visit. One thing that came out is the NEH Cultural and Community Resilience Grants. Those are due on May 21st. That's just an FYI. As I mentioned, we did the letters already. Holly, I think you're working on scheduling the CLG meeting.
Yes. Yep.
So more to come there. As I mentioned, we sent out the letter for Easton Street. We're still working on the idea of doing the solar video, but I think we have to wait until we hear back from the town. And obviously with town meeting, I think they have bigger fish to fry than us.
That would be something we'll work with Florencia in public communications, the section of the town administration. Yes, I would agree. Let's wait until after town meeting.
Yeah. So, and then education, just a reminder, coming up this month, there's the deconstruction work group, that's on the 24th. The NPS substitute materials training is on the 25th. And then we just talked about the CLG training, as Holly mentioned, it's on the 4th and the 6th. The 4th is during the day, it's at 10 a.m. And on the 6th, I think it's at like 7 p.m.
Yep.
So attend one, whatever works for your time. And we'll go from there. We also had talked about the MHC has maritime education grant program,
Mm-hmm.
and it's matching with the larger NPS program. And then we're still working. We talked about doing a disaster resiliency historic structure workshop. We just have this by the end of the year. And then we've continued our collaboration with our peers. So nothing major updating here. As I said, probably the update for next month is that we're going to talk about the letter that we're going to send for the Pleasant Street in Williams Lane. So that'll be updated. So that's about it here.
Thanks, Abby.
Awesome.
Any comments or questions about our goal chart? Okay, well, we'll move on. Thank you, Abby. Approval of the minutes, March. I so apologize. I haven't gotten a chance to read those.
I
Can we-
did. Yeah, I
Okay.
did. They looked fine to me, from
Yeah,
my recollection.
I
Abby
move
did
we
an
approve.
excellent job with the minutes.
I make a motion, we approve them.
Okay, who do we have now? Is it
Only
just,
4 of us.
is it,
We're still a quorum, I believe.
Yep,
Okay.
you are. Clement, you'll have to second them.
A second.
on your motion, Tom,
Aye.
Clement,
Aye.
Abby?
Aye.
And Angus, you're an abstention.
I will, yeah, oh, that's fine. We're 3-1 and it carries.
Yep.
And we're 3-0. Okay, well, I guess unless there's any other business anyone wants to bring up, we can conclude.
I move we adjourn.
Thank you, Tom. Do I hear
You run a good meeting. I
Can I second that?
guess it's right on the button.
Yep.
we try. Tom, on your motion.
Aye.
Clement,
Second. Aye.
Abby,
Aye.
I as well. Thank you all, and thank you, Holly. Abby,
Thank
thanks for
you.
taking the support.
Yes, thank you, Abby, very much.
Yeah, good
And,
meeting.
Oh, no problem. Happy to help. At least now I know I can do it. So it's all good.
Yay.
Everyone have
Thank
a
you.
good
This helped me
weekend.
out. Have a good
Yep.
one.
Have a good
Have a
weekend.
good
Bye,
vacation.
guys.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.